Julian here, and today I want to be showing you how to make lo-fi house like DJ Seinfeld. I've wanted to do this one ever since my first tutorial because I think DJ Seinfeld has a very particular kind of style, and I wanted to cover it. It's very like sample based and very much based around like working with audio and stuff and sort of rejuvenating old samples. So yeah, I wanted to try and make this video. And as always, the project file and samples and presets and MIDI and all that kind of stuff are in the description for just $5 on my Bandcamp. It's the first link. You can't miss it. If you want to support me, this is a really great way to do it, and I really appreciate it. So thank you very much, and here's the video. So this thing I have in front of me is what you heard in the intro. It's 121 BPM, so pretty nice kind of house tempo. And it's mostly based around this sample, which is, again, kind of like stylistically what you want to do here. It's just sort of working with samples and like building those up into full tracks. So the sample that I have is this. So it's kind of like this old sort of like late 80s, early 90s R&B style track. And those are the kind of samples you want to find. Those have been used a lot in lo-fi house, but especially with DJ Seinfeld, I've heard in a lot of his tracks, like, these are the kind of samples that he goes for. So you want to look through, like I said, like old kind of like 90s R&B, like in this style with like a lot of drum machines and like Yamaha DX7 keyboards. I'd recommend looking at groups like Shy, like SHAI, and H-Town is another one I was listening to. Just those kind of people, and you should find a few other things through the related artists. But yeah, like those kind of samples are really like the heart and soul of the style of music, so I recommend checking them out. But once I put that into this project file, I did a few things with it. I pitched it down -2, so I'll take all these effects off and I'll show you. So I pitched it down, and that just makes it a lot like deeper and kind of like, it just felt more powerful to me once I had all the effects on it. So that was that's what I did there. After that, I put on this low pass filter with a bit of resonance. And as you can hear already, that just helps us get that lo-fi sound so much like easier, because essentially like the lo-fi sound that everybody's into is created by old machines that will literally take the high end off of your samples, like just by putting them into there. That would happen. And so we're just recreating that with a low-pass filter, just taking off the high end. And you can see, like I said, already it gets it very close to like the kind of true lo-fi sound. After that, I put on this a bit warmer, which is a saturator. It's a saturator preset, which you can find under saturator. It's like the first one in Ableton. And if you don't know, if you do know, you know I use this a lot. But if you don't know, then basically, yeah, this is just this nice little preset for a saturator. It's just good for like when you want to drop something on that isn't going to be like too intense. Like saturator can kind of get extreme at times, but this is just a nice, like the title would say, it just makes it a bit warmer and a bit nicer sounding. So that sounds like this. And you can hear also this little resonance bump in the auto filter. I almost said in the EQ, which is essentially an EQ, but in the auto filter, this slight resonance bump actually gets kind of magnified by this, which I like. You can kind of hear around that frequency, it's getting a little bit crunchier and a little bit like crispier sounding, which is again like a pretty good thing. I like that sound for lo-fi house. So after that, I have this auto pan on here, which is doing like a fake sidechain kind of effect, because I was having a little bit of a hard time getting to sidechain this to the kick. It just sounded kind of weird. So I created a fake sidechain with this auto pan. And if you don't know, you can actually do this very easily. All you do is get an auto pan, and what you have to do is turn the phase down all the way. Because if you listen, when the phase is up, all that it's doing is it's just turning the volumes of the left and right ear down at different times, and that's what's causing like that fluid auto panning effect. But if you turn the phase all the way down, what happens is now it's just affecting the volume of the mono signal. So if you can sync this to the tempo, you can get an auto sidechaining effect, which you can. So what you got to do is click this little note here, and that syncs it to the tempo, and you can set it to quarter notes for the sidechain effect. And then what you got to do is go over here and select this saw wave and then click the normal button to invert it, and now, there you go, you get like a sidechain effect. But as you can see, I took it a little bit further with this one over here because I played around with the shape knob, and basically what the shape knob does is it controls the shape of the waveform. So I set it to, I think the number was like 27. I set it there because it still lets through a lot of the sample, but it's very tight and controlled, and it sounded pretty good with the kick. So that's what I did there. And then at the end of the chain, all I did was just cut out some low end using this EQ8. Pretty simple. I just made a little sort of cut there. Next thing I'll show you is the bass, which is the sample loop again, and it's actually got less processing on it. It's just the sample loop, but what I did was I low passed it, so it's just like the lowest frequencies, and then I put a bit warmer on it again to beef it up a bit more, which this isn't like the most scientific way to, not like scientific, but this isn't like the most sort of like, I guess like logical way to do this. Like putting the saturator after this autofilter is really mostly just adding some harmonics on top, and that's why it's sounding beefier. But with this style, I try not to think of it logically, and I more try to think of it as just sort of like a process of like having fun and just doing things quickly, but in a smart way. And so that's why I do stuff like this, where you just put like the low pass filter and then a saturator right after it, adding back on harmonics that we supposedly cut out with the autofilter. But yeah, so that sounds pretty thick. Again, I was just trying to make it kind of like big and boomy, and not really thinking too much about like the super technical way to do it. But then after that, I have that same auto pan, which is doing the sidechain effect. And yeah, so that's pretty much how I made the bass. This is a good technique. I've talked about this a little bit in some of my other videos, but if you're working with a sample, before you try to make a bass line with a synth, try doing this, because what's going to happen is like, if I just took this out and made a synth, like say I just made a sub bass under this, it wouldn't have quite the same like texture and like vibe to it that this is going to have, because this bass line is made out of a sample, so there's all the qualities of the sample being played, and it just adds a lot more character and texture to the sound. And in my opinion, or in my experience, usually this actually will sound better than doing like a synth bass line, so that's why I did this. And yeah, so after that we have the drums, which are pretty simple. I have this kick, which is actually being processed quite heavily, and I'll show you what I did to it. So basically, I started with this kick. I'll show you the original sample. Show in browser. Okay, there we go. So yeah, I started with this like 808 kick, and what I did was I put it into simpler, and I got it sounding like this. Let me turn this up just for a second. So basically, as you can see, I turned the sustain all the way down and turned the decay down a little bit from the default setting. And I turned the release all the way up, but I usually just do that. Ooh. And then I pitched it down a little bit, like -5 semitones or so. And yeah, so I was just really trying to just make this like a tight, short kind of kick in here, because all this processing over here is like really kind of messing with it and making it, in some cases, actually making the sample sound a little bit longer. So I wanted to just make this a really short, tight hit to play with. And yeah, so after that, first thing I did was I added this little EQ, which is just boosting the high end, because I felt like it was sort of lacking some, so I just kind of took some time and went with it. After that, I put on this push preset for Ableton's limiter, which you can actually get here. I'll show you. It's literally just under limiter. If you click on this one, push, there you go. And I turn the volume up, or the gain up a little bit. And like, again, this is a similar thing to using the saturator after cutting out all the high end with the filter. I'm not trying to do this in the most, like I said, like scientific sort of technical way. I'm just trying to do this in the style, in the way that makes it sound the coolest when I'm making the style. And to me, adding this limiter really like beefed it up and made it fatter, and definitely took it in that direction I was trying to go in. I'm going to turn this down a little bit. But after that, I added another EQ, actually, and I cut a little bit of the high end. And then I cut a little bit around here, too. this is just like a quick, simple thing that I did that I thought was pretty necessary because there were some kind of nasty things going on, especially around here. Or not nasty, but I could hear them. Like when I really turned it up, I could hear like a kind of bump there that I wanted to get rid of. Let me see. Yeah, okay, there you go. That frequency. I want to get rid of that. And then the high end was just a little bit much after the limiter, so I did cut it a little bit there. After that, I added this glue compressor preset, which you can actually find in the sidebar, but I played around with it a little bit. And as you can hear, that really boosts it up. So what I used was, if you go under glue compressor, it's called Mastering Gentle Limiter. I put that on there. And then I turned on this EQ here. And as you can see, the EQ is actually doing a lot of the stuff that you hear. It's like really boosting it up. And it's because there's a little bit of like a bump around here with the EQ, and it's just kind of messing with it in a way that causes it to bring out some of those kind of bumpier frequencies. But that's good. It sounds very big and like huge after this. And we've gone from that little 808 kick to like a nice big kick that can really cut through the mix. And then after that, I just added another low-pass filter. Because some of that high-end was a little bit much, and it was taking away from the lo-fi vibe of everything, so I wanted to add that. So yeah, with the kicks, it's not too crazy. I mean, I noticed with DJ Seinfeld style, like, he uses a lot of sort of shorter, tight kicks like this. Like, some lo-fi house producers like those really big, long 909s, or like the big boomy 909s, or like 808s or whatever. But with DJ Seinfeld, I've heard he uses like a lot of very just tight and short and sharp kick sounds. So that's what this is. And the next thing I'll show you are the hi-hats. So they're pretty simple. Essentially what it is it's these two shaker samples. This one's doing 16th notes, and this is playing the upbeats. And then I have this 909 hi-hat, which you can even see it here, like in, like in this part and in here. I have the 909 hi-hat, just adding some little accents, which is a big thing I've heard a lot in like a lot of lo-fi house music. People do this, like they won't have the 909 hi-hat through the whole thing. They'll just have the little spots where it comes in, like here. And I think it sounds good at the end of every 2 bars. It's like a nice little kind of transitional element. So I added it in there. Nothing really too special there. It's just a basic 909 hi-hat sample. Same with the 2 shakers. Just like some pretty straightforward shaker samples. But then the processing is kind of what's making them sound more lo-fi here. So all I actually have on here is a reverb and an auto filter. And really, it's mostly the auto filter that's giving it the lo-fi sound, because again, like I was doing with the sample, it's just sort of cutting out the high end, similar to the way that a lot of like old samplers would. And yeah, I was listening to like a lot of DJ Seinfeld's tracks, and again, this is like another thing, like he has a lot of these sort of like ethereal kind of hi-hats where they're like got a lot of high end cut out of them, and then they have this reverb on them. And the reverb's simple. It's just got a short decay time, or somewhat short decay time, and then a little bit of dry wet, which I turned down from the default. And again, they just sort of make this nice layer like over top of everything in the high end. That helps like the groove come along, and yeah, it's a nice sound. So nothing really too much to say there. Again, I would just recommend experimenting with some shaker sounds, because once you get them with the reverb and the filter, they can sound pretty good. And then those little 909 hi-hats as the transitional element there. Next thing I'll show you is the clap. Clap is pretty simple. It's just this clap sound that I had. I'll show you. This one, which was already a pretty dirty clap. But I took it, and I believe, I pitched it down -3. Because I was hearing a lot in his tracks that like he has like those kind of more low-tuned kind of claps. So I wanted to try to emulate that here. And yeah, that's a good way to do it. If you just take like a 909 clap and pitch it down like this, you'll probably get them, or you'll get pretty close. So on the processing for that, I'll show you dry. It sounds like this. So on this one, all I did was I cut out the low end, and then I added this echo preset, which I edited a little bit. I'll show you the original, but basically it's this clip slap analog, and it sounds like this. It just gives it a nice little sort of like slapback echo, if you're familiar with what that means. And yeah, it just gives it a little space. So originally the preset was like this, but there's a few things there. For one, there's this noise, which if you look at the VU meter over here, you can see it's coming up, like the noise is always playing. So I turned that off because I didn't want to have to worry about that. I have some cassette noise in the background for noise in this track. But then if you also listen, it's like very distorted, and that's because this input is turned way up. So you have to click on that and hit delete or backspace, and it'll go down to normal. And then I turned the feedback down a little bit, and I believe I messed with the time a little bit as well. Yeah, okay, there we go. So I turned the feedback down to like 25 or 26%. And then, yeah, I played with the left and right time there. So, again, this is just like using presets, but editing them, I think, is pretty good too. I do use a lot of presets on here, but, you know, you got to do what sounds best. And in this case, in some cases, it sounds best to just use the stock preset or use the preset exactly how it is. In this case, it sounded best to work with the preset and sort of try to make it into my own thing. So that's what I did. And then after that, all I have is this reverb, which I believe is the same one from the hi-hats. I think I just copied it down and then, yeah, did my thing with it. So that's pretty simple. And then the last thing here is really just this cassette noise. I'll turn it up. It has no processing on it. It's just a recording of like some cassette noise from like a tape player or something. I'm not sure exactly where it's from. I got this from one of those like I think it was actually freesound.org. But one of those kind of like any kind of website where you can get like samples like that, like different Foley samples and stuff. If you look up cassette noise or vinyl noise, you'll find something on there. And yeah, so I just put this in the background to add some atmosphere. And it just kind of gives it like this nice sort of like crunchy, sort of crispy high end over top of everything. And again, it just helps with the lo-fi vibe. Like it sounds like you're listening to an old house tape or something on cassette. So yeah, that's gonna be it for today, guys. Make sure to let me know what you think of this video in the comments, and like this video and subscribe. And maybe even share the video if it really helped you out. Also, make sure if you click the first link in the description, you can check out all the samples and MIDI and project and presets. Wow, I cannot talk. Presets from this video for just $5. It really helps me out. So if you want to check that out, I really appreciate it. So thanks again, guys, and I'll see you guys again tomorrow with another tutorial.